Thank you, Marcia. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Dave.
You were asking about questions from last session.
Yes, sir.
And there are a number of questions from last session, and I'd just like to add one more. And maybe you're probably going to deal with it today or next session. And that is the origin and presence of evil.
That's what we're talking about today. Today's our evil day.
One to deal with. But that's one of the things I struggle with.
We're all about evil today. We're getting there. We're just making sure we've all got God before we go to evil. Like, we want to have a firm grasp on God before we get into the evils. Thank you, Dave. We're glad you're back. Okay, Margaret?
I promised myself I wasn't going to say anything since this is the first class I've actually
Margaret,
attended.
hold on, pause.
But I felt this very
We're not
strongly,
thinking that
so
way.
I wanted to name when you were talking about disease and illness, an important knowing for me, living with chronic terminal cancer, is also it's incurable, right? According to Western medicine. And what an opportunity that is to imagine what healing really means.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's not just with the word disease, but
Yes.
we can also pay attention in our bodies in conscious and ways that aren't conscious.
Thank you, Margaret. Beautiful. Yes. I want to pause with that, Margaret. The beautiful wisdom and truth of what you just said and what you embody. And when we get into privation and evil, this is going to just get so much richer and thicker, our ability to talk about it. I'm breathing with you. Yes. Thank you, Margaret. All right, Francis, and then I'm going over here. I think there's somebody over here. Francis? Are you muted, Francis? There you are. There you are.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. My feeling about God, which is interesting because it was a long time coming. As a young adult, I went to a lecture at Vassar College by
Paul Tillich, yep.
And he talked about God being
The ground of our being.
ground of our being.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a really satisfying thing. I'm still not sure I understand it all, but I really like the way it feels to me.
Yeah.
And I think it encompasses a lot of this type of thing that you're talking about, because it's certainly not tied to people. It's tied to your whole self being part of God's system somehow.
Yeah, Tillich is what we call an existential theologian, and that God is the ground of our being. And again, he really disrupts the theistic, mechanistic understanding of this God that is just up there going, okay, you're going to die today, you're going to have a car accident, you're going to divorce your spouse, you're going to, I think where process theology, for me, gives me a little bit more than Tillich, who I studied very much. Tillich was the passage I had to translate out of German, so I have. Luckily, I knew that passage, and I was like, I know this, because I didn't know the German very well. So, anyway, what process theology gives me a little bit more than Tillich's understanding of the ground of our being is this participation that God has in every moment that is unique to our unfolding. So there is a sense in which the ground of being can sort of be, like I said, this existential condition that we all exist in. Process theology is saying God is participating more actively. God is the kind of poet of our best possibilities in every moment. God is the thing that makes freedom, not chaos. God is the thing that makes life not one damn thing after another. God is the presence in every moment that gives us a healing opportunity. And as much as I love Tillich, I think his existential theology struggles with that kind of relational aspect of how God is participating with us. But I'd take Tillich any day over the theistic, mechanistic God. I'll take Tillich any day. Yeah. Okay, somebody over here had a question. No? No? Okay. Anybody else on Zoom? Okay.
But you've just identified one characteristic, I think, is that the God that we're discussing by Whitehead is one who is changing to meet our needs as opposed to being a constant God. Is that correct?
The God of process theology is not unchanging. There is remember that Whitehead talks about the primordial character of God and the consequent character of God. The primordial is this kind of unique way that God is in touch and resonant with things like beauty with a capital B, and hope and love and our best possibilities. The consequent nature of God is this concrete way that God is interacting with every moment, with every actual occasion, with every act of prehension. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Are we ready to get to evil? Without my notes, I'm gonna go crazy. Okay, we're going crazy with evil now. Okay. So I'm gonna try to here we go. Shake it out. Okay. So wait, before we go to evil, let's just have a quick little primer on prehension. Can somebody just refresh our collective memory on prehension?
That which is going on that we are not aware of.
Prehension, that which is going on that we're not aware of. Okay. It's pre-conscious. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to say about prehension or feeling? Either one? Okay, Margaret.
I'm just going to read what I wrote that you said.
Okay.
Feeling is the image of God in us.
Yes. Feeling is the image of God in us. And you all still haven't gotten to hear the beautiful song that Robin Maloney wrote about the great prehender. Feeling is the image of God in us. The capacity to prehend all that is, the past, the present, and the future. Okay? Who else? Anything else about feeling or prehension?
I can read out of your chapter.
Okay, good.
Prehension is how feelings are experienced or perceived.
Yes.
And there's positive and negative.
Yes. Thank you. You just set the table. There's positive and negative prehension. Positive and negative in that positive prehension adds to feeling. Negative prehension takes away from feeling. Which brings us to evil. So, Whitehead uses several words to talk about evil, and I'm just going to put some of those words out just so you have them, okay? And then we're going to dig in a little bit. Destruction is one word that Whitehead uses as the definition of evil. Privation is another word that Whitehead uses. Also discord, but discord is not always evil. We'll talk about that in a minute. Disturbance. Now this is where it really gets interesting, okay? Anesthesia, tameness, low intensity, reduction to the background, and triviality. Okay? So one of the most important things to remember, and that's as far as my notes go. So now I'm off to the races, and I don't have any pens. Here we go. So in this kind of binary that we've been taught to live in Western philosophy, we have an either or world, right? Good or bad. Things are good or bad. In process philosophy, a lot of things are both. A lot of things are both. And the most important aspect is look at that. Relationship. Relationship. Okay, relationship. So let's think of this more in terms of a continuum than a binary, okay? So at this end of the continuum, we have triviality. At this end of the continuum, we have zest, okay? So evil is the condition of possibility of deprivation, okay? And deprivation takes many forms, but all of them somehow trivialize what something could have been. So anytime something is emerging and it doesn't become its best possible outcome, there is evil there. There is deprivation. There is privation. There is triviality. Now, here's some of the really important stuff to remember. Think about the nature of the universe, okay? We live in something called finitude, right? Things are limited. In other words, the second you become something, you didn't become something else. So the very nature of our experience and our reality involves evil, privation, destruction, something not happening that could have happened. So evil isn't always bad necessarily. But evil can be, depending on the context and condition, can perhaps be better than an alternative. But maybe there were some other alternatives that were even better than that. So we're constantly living in what he called perpetual perishing. In every moment, something didn't happen. Something did. Every choice we make in our life excludes some other choices. And so for Whitehead, freedom, okay, is not a moral absolute. Freedom is the condition of possibility for evil, just like freedom is a condition of possibility for beauty.
Would you please say that again?
Yes. Freedom is a condition of possibility for evil, as well as the condition of possibility for beauty. Now, beauty with a capital B, it always has a capital B for Whitehead. Beauty with a capital B. I know this pen is terrible. Beauty with a capital B is when something realizes, and it's always fleeting, but it's maximum expression of beauty. Beauty is when something flowers in just the best possible way that it could have. And beauty is part of prehension that God brings into each actual occasion, each emerging. In other words, this is sort of the carrier of our best possibilities. Okay? This is where I wish I had my notes. I'm actually going to look on my notes on here. I'm not staring at you all Zoom people. I'm just looking for something. So let's talk a little bit more about freedom. Okay? Okay, so first let's talk a little bit about destruction, just so I make sure I get you all up to date on that. So destruction is where he's trying to explain that in every moment, in every unfolding, there is a loss of actuality and a loss of possibility. A loss of actuality and a loss of possibility. In every moment, there's something that didn't happen. In every moment, there's something that now is not going to happen because of what happened. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We live this every day. You could give a lot of examples. Okay? So, in this way, this kind of destruction is banal. It's a part of our everyday experience. It's just a part of existence. Okay, so that doesn't have a lot of like ick factor to it. It's hard, right? But it's just life. That's how we know it. We know life to always include these kind of mini losses all day. Our bodies are dying even as we're living. We can have many examples of this. And this is where he uses this idea of perpetual perishing. So I want to read you a quote from Marjorie Suhaki's book called The End of Evil, Process, Eschatology, and Historical Content. And historical context. Doesn't that sound fascinating? Okay. So this is the image she uses to help us understand perpetual perishing. So you might want to close your eyes or just relax. Don't try to grasp at it. So there's a mighty waterfall, imagine it, greater than Niagara, greater than Victoria. If each drop of water which has ever fallen over the underlying ledges and cliffs for millennia of time could be conceived as an actual entity, that is, as a prehending subject, reaching the edge and tumbling down, crashing into the waiting river which it itself helps to create, only to be succeeded on the ledges above by innumerable other drops of water, the force of perpetual perishing might be grasped. Each drop moves into the river, but the waterfall as a whole continues through time. Perpetual perishing is the loss of each drop of actuality, even though there is an endurance of the total effect. So just float in that for a minute. Does that help anybody with what we're talking about? Okay. Let's keep going. So, another really great example I want to share with you is this idea of the poverty of the past. So this is something I feel like we can really relate to as well. So because all reality is relational, because we're always participating in destruction and deprivation at this kind of, there's a low kind of tonality to it, okay? We need to be able to talk about when evil is, it's tragic. It takes away such that a human being is not fully able to be human. That's where Whitehead talks about the poverty of the past. Because we're all so immersed in context. And this is where we get into the idea that culture and culture, context, institutions, systems, policies can kill people. They can make the world a place that's more evil, where evil is just moving around a lot easier, where evil is more agile and more impactful in people's lives, because it takes away from their ability to have their own freedom. Okay? So I want to read a little bit. Let me get the page in line again. I want to read this description of the poverty of the past and also the way he talks about hatred and war. Okay. Freedom is always held in relation to community. The occasions which succeed those who have responsibly chosen a lower form of existence than was possible find their own possibilities toward a high achievement significantly lowered through the poverty of the past. Yet the rejected ideal which was significant for the past retains the shadow of its insignificance for the future, since every feeling retains the impress of what it might have been but is not. So I really think Whitehead would love epigenetics, because that's kind of what he just said. That with every unfolding, the poverty of the past then imprints the present, which then imprints itself even on the future and what the future can become. So this is such a rich cosmology for us to talk about things like systemic racism. Like the way cultures and systems change the way our bodies function and work, the way we can be in relationship. Let's pause there, because that's a lot.
Marcia, I want to tie
Yes.
it into something.
Yes.
So, last Friday.
Oh, wait, let me get this to you.
So last Friday, I was going to head to Durham with my daughter, and I gave her a piece of babka cake that a friend of mine made for my birthday. And as we were getting ready to leave, she had an allergic reaction, and she's like, "Mom, what was in the cake?" And I said, "It was just 3 ingredients. She explained it to me yesterday." And we later found out that there were cashews in it. She's highly allergic to cashews. And but it took me a minute, and I got so scared and so nervous that I wanted to fight her instead of going to find out what was in the cake, because I got so scared of having to go back to Mission Hospital after what happened to us in October. And so my body immediately went into like fighting her instead of being empathetic or really being there with her, because I immediately knew that I had to call you, and I had to call Dan, and I had to call people to be there with me to go to the hospital. And so as I'm hearing you say this, it's like, yeah, it just stays there. And this happened in October. Friday it just took me there.
Right there. Yeah.
Whew.
Let's breathe. We all just take a few deep breaths with Marcia. We are right here, Marta. We're right with you. And what you've just shared and what we can feel with you is the order of magnitude, right, of that imprinting of the poverty of the past. So what happened to impoverish the past? If we use this hospital example, is the collusion of culture, individuals, violence, all of these different things to make an experience of utter vulnerability where help and support was needed, an experience of terror and danger and more violence. And so that the order of magnitude of that, right? It comes back. Because your body knows it. It remembers it. It stores that away in a different way than when somebody's nice to you walking down the street, because that's not a threat. Well, it might be, depending on who it is, but yeah, but you see what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying. And so what Marta is describing is this just immediacy, the way it just came right back. All of our bodies do that. We all do that. Do we listen to it? Do we recognize it? Do we know what to do with it? Those are other questions. Okay? Thank you for sharing. So here is this example of hatred. Okay? Make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay. Hatred as a possibility is simply that. The possibility of hatred. Its value must be judged relative to context. So take that in for a second. Hatred itself is not good or bad. Hatred itself is not good or bad. You have to consider it in context. What is it that is being hated? Under what circumstances? For example, God is sometimes portrayed as hating evil, in which case one might assume hatred to be a good and godly thing. Yet hatred is also a motivating factor in many a destructive deed, in which case one might call it evil. Hatred per se is neither good nor evil, but simply an abstract possibility for feeling. Hatred as possibility is neutral with regard to value, requiring the concreteness of existence for its valuation. So that gives you a really visceral example. Hatred, right? When we hear hatred, we think bad, don't hate. Don't hate things. Don't even use that word. I used to tell my kids, don't use that word. It's violent, it's too strong, but let's think about it. Do we hate war? We should. Do we hate that children get sexually assaulted? We should. Yeah, I think we hate that. Do we hate that 1 in 4 women are raped in our culture? Yeah, I think we do hate that. You can think of some other things. Racism. We hate racism. And then hate is part of what racism is, what we hate about racism, right? Right? But it really it makes us as human beings be much more substantive in the way we talk about what the problem actually is. Like one of my pet peeves, and I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, is the sign "Love wins." That just, to me, I need more than that. What kind of love? Why do we have to win and lose? Like, what are you trying to say with that? And for me, hatred is something that we need to understand more because it exists in all of us. And there's some ways that it protects us, and it's some ways that it clarifies for us as a community what our values are. And then there's some ways that it really tears us apart and dehumanizes us, and it's destructive, and it deprives us of something. So hatred could help us be more resonant with our best possibilities. And hatred could really decrease our ability to be human then. Okay, see Margaret.
This has to do with poverty of the past.
Yeah.
And hatred.
Yeah.
So what would a Whiteheadian response be to saying we don't want to teach the truth about what happened in the past because that would be hating our country? Like that's all messed up, right?
Oh yeah. So, but that's a good example though. Let's unpack this example of critical race theory, okay? Because what word gets traded around about that? Why it's bad? It's teaching our kids to hate themselves because they're white, right? Okay, let's talk about that. What is critical racism, critical race theory teaching people to hate?
Ignorance.
Okay, ignorance. What else? Sorry?
Being uninformed.
Being uninformed?
It's teaching them to hate what happened.
It's teaching them to hate what happened?
Slavery.
What did happen?
Slavery.
Oppression. White supremacy is what they're being taught to hate. Is white supremacy the same as whiteness or being white? No, is it? Anybody? Okay, it's not, is what I'm hearing. Does Zoom have anything to add? That white supremacy is a culture. Whiteness, or being white, having white skin is about your melanin, right? But that melanin was weaponized, that amount of melanin in your skin was weaponized by a culture, but it could have been anything, okay? And it is in other cultures. Lindsay and I had this discussion about how, it moves differently in Northern Ireland. It's Protestant and Catholic. But, so, hate isn't our main enemy, right? Hate is just a tool. And you can use hate to make the world a better place if you mobilize it in the direction of zest.
Wow.
So if we look at the critical race theory problem with people saying, I don't want critical race theory in school, I want to make my child see that they're white. Okay, what happens then if we deprive those kids of the true history? What happens to their existence, to their ability to live in this diverse world? What happens? It's diminished. It's trivialized. It's deprived. It's evil. And then it becomes deeply imprinted not just on the poverty of their past, but their present and their future.
And that's the whole point.
And that's the whole point. So hatred isn't the problem there. But this obfuscation around the power of culture to trivialize our humanity, trivialize our ability to be a human family is. And learning the truth, we're going to get to that in a minute with a capital T, is deeply tied to zest. Now, truth is another thing that doesn't really have a moral quality to it until it lines up with context and actuality. Okay? We'll get to that in a minute. That was a good example. Who asked that? Margaret. All right, go Margaret. Margaret Candy. Okay, next I want to read you the example of war. I believe that's on page 80. Yeah. I hope these are helping give some flesh to this. Okay. Terrorism and war likewise speak to the competition of values in a finite sphere, and the ability through our very interdependence to bring destruction rather than goodness upon each other. Okay, breathe. Interdependence, depending on the context and the way it's being used, can be an instrument of destruction. Okay, that's real different. It can also be an instrument of beauty. To the degree that any portion of the human community is destroyed, every human being suffers to a greater or lesser degree. Each of the evils named can be understood through the violation of an interdependence that is neither accidental nor arbitrary, but which is the very stuff of all existence. Freedom and community is the structure which allows evil to occur. Freedom and community is also the structure which allows redemption to occur. Okay? It's much richer, much more resonant with what's really happening in the world than thinking that God is good and that this evil personification of evil are just battling against each other. There's a lot more ambiguity, right? We know deprivation when we experience it. But we're not just pawns in this. We're participating, we're metabolizing, and the more, again, we can really know ourselves and the way we work, the way we function, the more we're not just going to be led around the nose by culture, by deprivation, by the big lie, which for Suhaki is violence. Violence is the original sin. Violence is the thing that broke the human bond. Violence is the thing that violated what creation tells us. She's not talking about natural violence. Oh my gosh, there's a little lizard. Hey, little guy. Hey. Hey, buddy. We need to get him out. So,
What is it?
tell us.
Lizard. Little fella. Sing together. There he is. Yeah.
My cat used to catch us.
All right, he's going out.
How impressive Teresa's to catch a lizard.
Okay. Oh wait, here's your bag. Okay. So, where were we before the little violence? Violence broke the kind of human bond. That the violence is what violated the rule of feeling. That that the full flowering of feeling is when our best possibilities are available to us. And violence is this utter act of destruction. This utter trivialization of our ability to feel. All right. How are y'all feeling? I mean, emotionally. Okay. Here, go ahead.
Okay, so if violence is the original sin, does that mean, when you said it's a trivialization, is that the root? Is that kind of, or is that not a good analogy? It's kind of is that at the core? I mean, I don't know what I'm even asking.
So are you looking for like original sin?
Yeah, probably the word original sin. Maybe it's used in a different way.
So it's a little bit different because we remember that, well, we might not. Maybe you're lucky and you don't know about Augustine. Augustine is the kind of father of this idea of original sin being sort of a genetic thing that's passed through basically a woman's body and sex with a woman. He hated women. It started with his mama. He and his mama had some troubles. But so unlike the kind of Augustinian understanding of original sin that is basically based on sex and women, sex with women and women's bodies, so all babies are born evil, or born with sin, born with that original sin. Violence is this, you can try to trace it back to some first violence, but all we have are myths and metaphors or whatever. But violence is this cultural rupture that then imprints itself on our collective past. It changes what's possible. It changes what is not possible. Okay? Violence makes an imprint on the past, on the present, on the future. It's kind of like when a child is born and maybe the first few months of life they attach, they learn to trust, and then maybe a parent dies and they then are with a different caregiver and that person is violent. They have that original attachment and embodied learning of what it means to feel safe, but so early in their life that becomes violated. And so their possibilities, that's the doorbell. Their possibilities are permanently impacted by that. And we call that trauma, right? I see Pam.
So I'm just trying to understand this like on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Like we hear something and it's like beyond comprehension, someone hurting someone else, and it stays with us. Is that person, something was, like that person who did that, and we can think of examples, were they impacted by the past or epigenetics, or
Do you mean the person who
the person who perpetuated the evil, and it affects all of us and it reverberates, and we can't quite, we do all have evil in us, but we can't quite go that far. Yes. So is that person a product of the past or epigenetics, or I'm trying to, I think a lot of us try to understand.
Yes, thank you, Pam. Very good question. So, yes, and yes. That person we're all the product of our past. But our past is constantly, our present is already our past. Like, our present is fleeting, it never really is. So we're constantly living out of our past as our present. And our future is constantly impacted by that as well. So the more someone has been kind of steeped in deprivation, in triviality, in rupture, in destruction, okay, the more deeply imprinted they are by that, and the more difficult it is. It's kind of like diminishing returns. You think about it. It's kind of like equity. You think about it like when you start out and you're here and everybody else is here, and you've got to jump over all these mountains, and this person has just a clear shot. Okay? This person's going to have a way different experience. And so if we use the example of violence, of perpetrators, I mean, there's a lot of research on that. I don't know who this is. Hey, can I help you? Okay, great. Sorry, the door was locked. So the example of violence, there's a lot of research on this, right? That people who were victims do have a higher likelihood to be perpetrators, especially when the violation happened really young. It's really hard, right, to heal from those things. And some of those things are just tragic. There's just loss. There's not a redemptive quality to that. And some folks who have been so steeped in violence, again, their brains are different. Their physiology is different. Their ability to relate and connect to people can be different. Does that make them, though? Like, the part of what this cosmology and theological anthropology gives us is we can't demonize that person, right? Because we're all swimming around in the same waters. They just had a lot of different cuts at their capacity to really experience what full flourishing feels like. And if you don't know what something feels like, this goes back to Bob's thing. If your body doesn't have an experience of that ever, if you never knew what safety felt like, you're living a different world than somebody who does. Does that answer your question, Pam? I think you were asking something else a little bit at the end.
Well, it actually, is sort of hopeful, like if we could,
Right.
with human responsibility, like if we could
Yes.
help neighborhoods from the get-go and children and infants, and it feels like the trajectory will be different.
I want to pick up on that. Yes.
And it's not just helping, right?
Right.
It is creating the conditions for their flourishing, right?
Amen.
And so, and the other thing that is really important for us to remember is this is not just ideas. This is not just talking to somebody about you had a tough life. So, here's some money and a good school and you should be set, right? Their bodies have this imprinting. So to me, it just amplifies the importance of what we do in early childhood education and care of children in schools and and what have we done in our culture? Our schools are
Mess.
We've got armed officers in our schools now. Little kindergartners get punished they get into the juvenile justice system because they pulled somebody's hair. I mean, it's just, we've criminalized.
And suspending 3-year-olds.
And suspending 3-year-olds.
Black
Yeah.
3-year-olds.
Black 3-year-olds, right.
Let's be clear.
And criminalization of certain bodies. And the way that changes the way their ability to just learn, just play, just be a friend or have a friend, right? And so it makes it all the more important for us to cultivate trustworthy spaces. And again, I want to say something else, because this good-bad binary that we have in Western culture is really blown up by this, okay? Because the good white people sometimes are the ones doing the most harm under the auspices of helping or,
Saving.
or saving. I mean, let's think about our justice system. And the way we do not really have anything in this country that we could call restorative justice. We have a really dehumanizing justice system where when somebody messes up, we throw them away. We put them in a place where the food is terrible and they're not safe and they don't get to talk to people they love. And I mean, there are all kinds of things that happen to people who need the most support. Okay. Yes, Paul, and then I want to finish up.
Well, this is, last week you talked about introducing the concept of prayer changing behavior.
Yes.
And the thing that was disturbing to me was that evil prayers could change behavior. Is that something we're going to talk about next week?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because that is, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that.
It's pretty wicked. Yeah.
Yes, we're going to talk about prayer and church and community next week.
I don't know the answer to that, Paul, but I do know what my inner critic does to me.
Oh, yeah. Come on, Pamela. Yes. Yes.
So what you were talking about made me think of this study that just came out about how the social determinants of health can affect children's brains directly. Like if they're worried, they see their parents being worried about finances or housing or food, or it just actually changes their brains.
Yeah. Yes. Real. Yeah.
And talk about imprinting for the future, right?
I keep coming back to Resma Minikin's,
Yeah.
my grandmother's hand, and it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
Is that all the?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Resma Menacem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, and I mean, that's all about trauma and practice. And he divides the book up in practices for people of color, bodies of color, and white bodies, because we move in a very different world. So a few things I want to say before we go, and I'm going to open up the art room in there, is just a little bit about truth, okay? So beauty is the one aim of the world which in its very nature is self-justifying. So beauty is the only aim in the universe that's good in and of itself, or that can justify itself. Beauty is the internal confirmation of the various items of experience with each other, for the production of maximum effectiveness.
One more time.
So beauty is the internal conformation of the various items of experience with each other for the production of maximum effectiveness. Now that is really process talk, but it is that beauty is when things come together, the conditions come together for maximum effectiveness. Think of a flower that got enough fertilizer and that got enough rain and that got enough sun, and that bloom is just, oh my gosh, I've never seen the color like that. We're like that too. Mm-hmm. Truth concerns the relations of appearance with a capital A to reality with a capital R. So in other words, when the really real lines up with what we see, that's truth. Okay? Truth is the conformation of appearance with reality. Falsehood is corrosive. Falsehood takes away from our ability to see truth. Truth has a keenness, a vividness. Okay? The truth of supreme beauty lies beyond the dictionary meaning of words. Okay?
Yes.
Truth of supreme beauty, we can't talk about it. It's just way beyond our words. Apart from beauty, truth is neither good nor bad. Truth matters because of beauty. In the absence of truth, beauty is on a lower level with a defect of massiveness. In the absence of beauty, truth sinks to triviality. The whole heightens feelings for the parts. Parts heighten feelings for the whole. That's what he means by harmony of feelings. Okay? So we're going to talk some more about this, but compassion would be an example of that. When your experience kindles in you the ability to feel with the experience of others in a way that is loving and gentle and resonant, when the part and the whole can form and you can really be with somebody. Okay? All right. And again, remember, we're not dealing with a binary. We're not dealing with duality. We're dealing with continuums. Zest and triviality. Okay? Intensity would be over here with zest. Tameness would be over here with triviality. Okay? And over here would be uniqueness. And over here would be enforced conformity. Erasure of uniqueness. And we see this in our conversations around sexuality and identity. When we try to fit everybody in a box. There's evil in that. It's trivializing, it's deprivation, it's hurt, it's harm, it's violent. When uniqueness is what we honor, there's zest, there's differentiation, there's vividness to the world. That is deeply resonant. You see how this sets the stage for a lot of great things that we care about today. And this is a cosmology to support it. All right. Yes, Alexandra.
I just can't resist adding this piece because I think it fits. Redemption is not a clean break from evil. This is Whitehead, not me.
Yes, right.
But a power that refuses to let it have the last word. Amen.
Yes.
A power that remains even in the horrible, ongoing suffering of the world to resist, repair, heal, struggle, and even celebrate what is good.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for reading that. That's a great place for us to stop. There's art in the other room, and folks at home, maybe you have some things that you could use to just not use the thinking part of your brain for a few minutes to process some of this. There are a few things out in the art room, but I'm just going to close us with one. And that is a translation of the Lord's Prayer that's from the original Aramaic. And this is the one we're using in worship on Sunday. So this will be our closing prayer, and then I'll invite those of you at home to go on off camera and spend about 20 minutes or so drawing, doodling, writing. You can work with fabric or paper or pencil or whatever. Maybe you want to write. Whatever helps you just kind of let your body metabolize some things. Not analyze, but metabolize. And if you do create something that you would like to share, please bring it to the church or let me know. And we're going to be using some of this art in our Easter art installation in the sanctuary. Here is the prayer. O cosmic birther, from whom the breath of life comes, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration. May your light be experienced in my utmost holiest. Your heavenly domain approaches. Let your will come true in the universe, in all that vibrates, just as on earth, in all that is material and dense. Give us wisdom and understanding and assistance for our daily need. Detach the fetters of faults that bind us, like we let go the guilt of others. Let us not be lost in superficial things, in materialism or common temptations, but let us be freed from what keeps us off from our true purpose. From you comes the all-working will, the lively strength to act, the song that beautifies all and renews itself from age to age. Sealed in trust, faith, and truth, I confirm this with my entire being. So blessings to all, and I'll come in there and get people oriented. But good night to our folks on Zoom, and prayers for 20 minutes of just some creativity and metabolizing. Take care. All right. Some of you may have to go. If you can stay, there are 3 different opportunities in here. One is play.